people. As Assistant Secretary Carson mentioned to you when he visited with you on Monday, the United States government takes security sector reform in Africa very, very seriously. And indeed, the nature of our ongoing security sector reform efforts dovetail and are closely aligned with our newly released strategy for Africa. Some of you may be aware that last Friday, President Obama and the White House issued a new Presidential Policy Directive, or PPD, outlining our engagement with Africa, which is centered on 4 key priorities. The first is advancing democracy and democratic institutions in Africa. The second is supporting economic growth, trade, and investment. The third is promoting peace and security on the continent. And the fourth is promoting opportunity and development. As we think of security sector reform, it is very closely tied with the first and the third pillar. Not only promoting peace and security, which is obvious, but also promoting peace and security in the context of promoting good democratic governance. Because as all of us know, and frankly, as recent events in Mali and Guinea-Bissau demonstrate, the strengthening of a security apparatus without the strengthening of strong civil institutions to which that security apparatus must report and which govern that security apparatus can lead to disastrous results, such as obviously the coups that have taken place in those 2 countries in recent weeks. But when we have the balance correct, when there is a security apparatus that is not only capable but also responsive not only to civilian institutions but also to civilian ideals, then one gets some of the best outcomes. One of the most important examples of this, in my view, in recent months has been the situation in Malawi. With the death of President Mutharika, many of you, certainly from SADC countries and others that are following situations, know that over the course of Easter weekend this year, following the death of President Mutharika, there was a great deal of tension over the course of that weekend, or which way things would develop, whether or not power would pass to the president's brother in an extra-constitutional manner, or whether the Constitution would be followed and power would pass as defined by the Constitution to the Vice President, Madam Joyce Banda. We all know that ultimately things worked out the way they should have, and that President Banda was duly inaugurated as president. But what has been less widely reported is that the reason that was able to take place is because the armed forces in Malawi, led by General Odilo, were insistent that the Constitution be followed, that the rule of law be respected, and that the Vice President be sworn in accordingly. And as a result of his leadership, consistent not with being loyal to a particular person, but being loyal to the Constitution, things were able to develop, and Malawi is now on a much better path towards governance. The United States has prioritized security sector reform in its programming, and we provide really quite substantial support for defense and police activities in crisis countries such as Liberia, where we provided about $300 million, South Sudan, another $300 million, Democratic Republic of the Congo, about $90 million, Somalia, $106 million, as well as in Cote d'Ivoire and Guinea. And our approach to security sector reform is based on 3 core pillars. First is that it must be democratic, for all the reasons that we mentioned. It is critically important that security apparati report to democratically elected, democratically legitimate civilian institutions. The second is that our approach to security sector reform must be comprehensive. Obviously, it focuses on the military, on making the military responsive to civilian leadership, on ensuring the military understands basic principles of human rights and chain of command. But it's also important to focus on other security actors, such as the police, for all the obvious reasons in terms of protecting the civilian population. But we know that it even has to go farther than the police. For example, it is crucially important to focus on all aspects of the judicial sector, both judges, courts, corrections. Because even if you have a strong police sector that is capable of arresting people, but there's no way to adjudicate legally what happens to those people, then bad things can happen as well. Even if you have a way to adjudicate them legally, it must be important that the rule of law is transparent and respected so that those judicial processes are seen to be fair and legitimate, and also that corrections institutions, prisons, jails, etc., are held to high standards of human rights and are consistent with the other legal and security institutions of the country. The final pillar of our security sector engagement is that it must be multi-tiered. So we work closely with international partners, we work closely with other broad continental partners, clearly like the African Union, work closely with sub-regional groups like ECOWAS, SADC, et cetera, and obviously they work very closely not only with our national partners, but also very closely with local partners as well. And when one combines all of these factors together, one can have the sort of security apparatus that provides the basis for a secure society whose security is seen as legitimate by the population, which therefore provides the basis for everything else that all of us are trying to do in all of our societies, providing good economic growth, ensuring basic services for citizens, ensuring the territorial integrity of our countries, etc. Let me just say this one last thing as I build towards closing. I want to give a free advertisement here this morning. This said that nothing is free, but this one is. If any of you in any of your countries have a desire for technical assistance, for support for security sector reform, the United States will respond to your requests, and we are ready to work with you as of today. Now, let me be very clear about what that means for us. Obviously, we have our own limitations with regard to equipment and such things, but we have almost an unlimited supply of our ability to send people and to work with you technically to develop the sorts of processes and the sorts of principles that are inherent to make good, strong security sector apparatuses work. Frankly, we know, because we've seen it in our experience, when we work with partners and all we do is send equipment, at best what happens is the equipment simply sits and rusts ultimately, or maybe it's used but it's not used particularly well. We know that the hardware equipment is important, but it's the software, as it were, all of the ideas, all of the programs, all of the policies, all of the training that is far more important to building a strong security sector. And if any of you, any of your countries want to partner with us to help develop that software, we are more than happy to begin engaging with you immediately to do so. So with that, I thank you very much for your brief attention, and I look very much forward to having a robust conversation with you this morning. Thank you very much.